Hermanas, hermanos de la Red Católica Africana de Teología y Pastoral, me alegra saber de este encuentro en la Universidad Católica de África Oriental en Nairobi, que se reúnen con motivo del segundo Congreso Católico Panafricano sobre Teología, Sociedad y Vida Pastoral. Es un signo de esperanza que teólogos, laicos, sacerdotes, religiosas, obispos nos han tomado esta iniciativa de juntarse para discernir qué nos dice Dios hoy, no solo para atender las necesidades desafiantes, ciertamente, sino hermanos y hermanos de la Red Católica Panafricana de Teología y Pastoral. Me alegra saber de este encuentro en la Universidad Católica de África Oriental en Nairobi. Sé que se reúnen con motivo del segundo Congreso Católico Panafricano sobre Teología, Sociedad y Vida Pastoral. Es un signo de esperanza que teólogos, laicos, sacerdotes, religiosas, obispos hayan tomado esta iniciativa de caminar juntos. Juntarse para discernir qué nos dice Dios hoy, no solo para atender las necesidades desafiantes, ciertamente, sino también para hacer realidad los sueños africanos, sueños sociales, culturales, ecológicos, eclesiales. Y esto ya es señal de una iglesia africana en salida. Sigan adelante. En mis visitas a África siempre me ha impresionado la fe y la resiliencia de esos pueblos. Como comenté durante mi viaje a la República Centroafricana en 2015, África siempre nos sorprende. Hagan surgir lo mejor de ustedes en estas reflexiones para que sea sorpresa, para que nazca esa creación africana que nos da una sorpresa a todos. Porque África es poesía. La sabiduría de los ancestros africanos nos recuerda para esta importante convocatoria que las montañas nunca se encuentran, pero la gente sí. Sigamos adelante, juntos, acompañándonos, ayudándonos y creciendo juntos. Que una teología sapiencial como la que ustedes proponen sea la buena noticia de misericordia para los pobres y alimenta a las personas y comunidades en su lucha por la vida, la paz y la esperanza. Que el Espíritu Santo los inspire. Que de este Congreso salgan caminos que la Iglesia necesita. Caminos de conversión misionera, ecológica, de paz, de reconciliación y de transformación de todo el mundo. Y a todos los bendigo. Que Dios los bendiga. Que la Virgen nos acompañe. Y por favor, no se olviden de rezar por mí. Gracias.
Of the next session, that's Peter Jones to come forward. We clap for him as he comes, please. He will take us through the plenary session. I call upon the president of this congregation, Bishop Edward, come forward. We clap for Bishop as he comes forward, please. I call upon the co-president, Sister Jose Galula, to come forward. Sister Jose, come forward. We clap for her as she comes. Then I'll call on the presenters for this plenary, Lillian Ehidiamen, Nigeria, Belgium. Clap for Sister Lillian. I call upon John Martin Awar and Mary Justin and Martin Awar.
Nous allons commencer notre séance. Les personnes qui ont été appelées, c'est ceux qui sont impliqués pour la première séance. Nous avons appelé le président de la séance, Monseigneur Edouard. Nous avons appelé la coprésidente, la sœur José Ngalola. Et nous avons appelé aussi la personne qui sera la présidente de la séance en tant que telle, c'est Peter John. Et ensuite, les 3 personnes qui seront impliquées dans les différentes discussions et conférences, sœur Liliane, John Martin et puis Jen. Merci pour votre attention.
And I call upon the Vatican's official representative, Emilce Kuda, to come forward. Take your seat. I think we are limited of space, so over here.
Good morning, good afternoon, whatever time it is now. It's my privilege and honor 10 minutes ago to be asked to chair our opening plenary session with this esteemed panel. Being limited on time, we should immediately launch into the proceedings. However, a word of clarification, this is not an academic conference, speaking to all the academics like me. This is a palaver. This means we're here in an African synodal mode to encounter, to listen, and to share. After the presenters will go one by one in succession, we will then have an open dialogue. Not questions and answers, but dialogues intended to arrive at a new shared understanding. So I encourage you to think creatively and use your imagination for those who are unfamiliar and have not participated in such a dialogue. So let's begin first with Dr. Emilce Kuda, Secretary of the Pontifical Commission for Latin America, with words on the theology of the people. Please, Dr.
Thank you so much for this invitation here. Thank you so much, Dr. Peter Jones. He is my boss, so it's my honor that he introduced me here. Well, we can listen the message from Pope Francis, and it's my honor to be here speaking about the theology of the people. I would like to explain some little difference about that. As you know, my conference changed of the day, so I have my speech here in this little car. To understand what is theology of the people, we must understand first the importance or what it means, the social teaching of the church. Because in the 60s, in the 70s, the big discussion was about the social justice. Social justice is at the center of the social teaching of the church. But that is not an accidental. That is not that something that we can add it to the theology or to the Christian predication, to the Christian speech. That was the discussion in the 70s, in the 70s about this, and the conclusion was that social justice is essential to the Christian speech, to the Christian predication. This is important to understand what it means when the theologian from Latin America called for the first time in a despective mode theology of the people to this line of the theology from Latin America, because for some people speak about social justice is not speak about theology, or is not do something in relationship with the Christian predication. This is important, that social justice is constitutive of the Christian predication. If we can understand that, we can understand theology of the people, and we can understand Pope Francis. So, the first time that a person called theology of the people was in a sense that is not theology, or that is not theology of the liberation, because use another mediation, and some, maybe I can speak without this. It's okay? Yeah, I teach for 32 years, so I can speak like this. From my point of view, we must go theology of the people, because in the history, when the people determine with the name something, when we use the genitivos, for example, that is theology of the liberation. The second step is that is not theology. So, if we say this is theology of the people, then the second step is to say that is not theology, because that is theology of the people. For that, in my opinion, this is the theology of the people, the actual social magisterium of Pope Francis is the theology. But it's a theology speaking about the social justice. I lost my concentration. So speaking about theology of the people is to put the people like a subject, not like a plural. We call el pueblo. El pueblo is a singular subject. It's not the same, the people. The people is one person plus one person plus one person. That is not the idea of the people. The people is one subject. And like a subject, the people constitute their conscience between other persons. That is the unity that Pope Francis speaks about. He said, first the unity, and then the strategy. This is the second important thing. Strategy is not like in the business. Strategy first, the action. In the sense, the unity is the first. The unity is the only solution when you are the front to die, for example. So unity is the salvation. Pope Francis said in the middle of the pandemic, we must to get the union, if not we are lost. So in this mode to understand theology and to understand help the people is first is the unity. First is the unity. The people who is in union is not the people who think in the same mode. For example, in politics, the conscience, the social class conscience, union workers, because the people believe that they are sons of God, they fight for subsidiarity. What is subsidiarity? Is little organization in the community, organization who speak about politics. This is theology of the people. You can see that I am speaking about union workers, political parties, or political movements, organization of the community, but the foundation of that is not a political strategy. The foundation of that is the fight, because the people believe in God, the people believe that God created all the world for everybody, because the people believe that they are sons of God. So the first is the unity, and then is the strategy. Which is the difference between theology of the people and theology of liberation? The mediation. In liberation theology, the mediation was the sociology. In theology of the people, the mediation is the popular culture. Popular culture. Pope Francis speaks now about teología sapiencial. Sapiential theology. Sapiential wisdom is another mode of knowledge. It's not a scientific mode. If not, it's sapere in Latin. It's like test. Test the life. Test the good and test the bad of the life. For this, our suffering, when we test the suffering, when we test that our fathers or our sons are in danger, or they died, or they was in the narco traffic, or they lost the work, or we have not money for medicines, in that moment we test the bad and we test the good. And we know which is good and which is bad. That is sensus fidelium. Everybody knows what is good and what is bad for himself and for their community. For that, Pope Francis speaks about social communitarian discernment. The people come to discernment about what is good and what is bad. Maybe the people can discernment about how we can pay the deuda externa, no? The international ¿cómo se dice esto? Debt. Maybe not, because we are not economics. But everybody knows what is good and what is bad for themselves and for their community. This is social community discernment. And the people believe in this, because the people, our people in Latin America, Africa, and part of Asia, we are poor people, but we believe that we are sons of God, and we have the capacity to discern what is good and what is bad for the community, not for myself, if not for my community. So we have a lot of people here to speak in a short time, but this is an abstract about my speech, what is theology of the people. Thank you so much.
There are enough teachers in the room to know you have to use your teacher voice on occasion. Thank you, Dr. Kuda. A key part of what I heard there, which I think is going to be continued, is the challenge of institutionalizing an organic process of relationship building that doesn't have a predetermined end. The strategy. I hope we can figure it out together. Next we have Lillian, if you'll please come forward and use your teacher voice. Maybe this will miraculously revive.
My presentation is on conflict mediation as a synodal undertaking in Africa. A study in light of Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication. My presentation is divided into 4 sections. First, conflict mediation as a collective journey in Africa. The second part is on Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication and mediation of conflict. Then the third part is on the implication of Rosenberg's nonviolent communication and conflict mediation for Africa. Then the last session will be the conclusion. In most African societies, interpersonal and intergroup conflicts are widespread and sometimes require a third-party mediation. Because of the communal nature of African societies, mediation sometimes involves the whole community and the council of elders, or only the council of elders and the conflicting parties. Usually, most African societies use traditional means in resolving conflicts. This paper examined mediation approaches in different African communities, such as the Kadepo, Tanzania, Tiv community in Nigeria, Somaliland, Acholi of northern Uganda, and the Ubuntu approach of South Africans. In these communities, elders who are insiders facilitate the mediation process because they are regarded as repository of knowledge, experience, and listening skills. After listening, the elders advise the offenders to accept responsibility for the wrong done, show remorse for their actions by asking victims for pardon, while the victims, on the other hand, are advised to pardon the offenders. The various approaches stress the importance of forgiveness, healing, reconciliation, and restorative justice in attaining peace. Muriti notes that culturally inspired reconciliation focuses on Ubuntu, which always puts the interconnectedness of all people into consideration. He argues that even though the indigenous method is all-inclusive, it still has some limitations because the method is built on patriarchal foundation and needs to be enhanced with modern perspective that fosters gender balance in peace processes. Moriti's studies of the diverse African traditional mediation processes revealed their similarities, which involves elders and community members to achieve reconciliation. It also exposed the synodal nature of the African mediation process, which focuses on African communalism. However, the African traditional mediation process appears to be top-down approach with inadequate mediation skills, which may affect its effectiveness. Additionally, because of its synodal nature, it has a high prospect that needs further enhancement. Isaac Albert affirms that the method that involves elders as mediators has some limitations, particularly in situations where violent conflicts are promoted by the elders themselves. He suggests a sustainable approach that integrates both local and modern methods of handling conflicts. To enhance the African traditional mediation approach, the paper further examined Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication and conflict mediation process, which focuses on identifying and satisfying human needs. Marshall Rosenberg developed 4 principles of nonviolent communication, namely observation, feelings, needs, and requests. Observation refers to stating the fact of a person's experience without adding judgment or evaluations. What a person observes evokes some feelings in the person. Feelings enable a person to be aware of what is happening within and empowers them to name the experience using emotional words such as sad, angry, joyful, and so on. Feeling conveys a person's disposition and what is happening in the person's consciousness from the information received through observation or experience. It enables a person to identify their needs. Expressing feelings affects personal, interpersonal, and intergroup relationships, as well as the ability to connect the feelings to needs. Need refers to a motivating force that compels action for its satisfaction. It is the why behind all human actions and inactions. It is what we share as human beings, irrespective of culture and age. There is a connection between a person's feelings and needs. For instance, I am upset because I need attention. I am anxious because I need support. I am lonely because I need connection. Therefore, the ability to connect with the feelings that emanate from an experience enables a person to identify his or her needs at that moment. Awareness of people's needs fosters group collaboration, brings empathic healing, dispels conflicts, and fosters cooperation in organizations. Furthermore, strategy provides the how persons choose to satisfy needs. However, conflicts arise from the strategies individuals and groups choose for meeting a need. The conflicts people experience in their communities originate from the strategies they choose to meet their needs. All efforts in conflict mediation processes are attempts to identify the conflicting parties' unmet needs and collaborate in searching for peaceful strategies to meet the needs. However, because of lack of need consciousness, people are not able to connect with their needs and use modern language to express them. Nonviolent communication provides strategies for meeting needs, one of which involves making a request. A request is a strategy for meeting needs. When a person observes a situation without making judgments, express the feelings about it, and identify the needs underlying the feelings, then the next step would be to make a specific, explicit, and doable request of how to meet the identified needs. Request provides space for the person receiving it to either say yes or no. And it is what differentiates a request from a demand. When people hear a demand, they try to resist because of the perceived pressure that it carries. The 4 basic principles described above find their application in conflict mediation. Rosenberg's mediation process follows 5 steps. During mediation, first, the mediator establishes a quality connection between the conflicting parties. Second, the conflicting parties express their experiences, which they sometimes mix with judgments, while the mediator listens and translates the expressions and judgments into needs. Third, the mediator checks with each of the conflicting parties whether their needs have been adequately articulated. Fourth, the mediator engages empathically with each speaker, especially when there are arguments, pains, and tears, to enable them to articulate their needs correctly. Fifth, after the mediator has gained clarity of both parties' needs, the mediator can support them with suggestions of the strategies needed to resolve the conflict by making doable requests. This process promotes satisfaction for all the parties' unmet needs, instead of a party compromising their needs to achieve peace. It is a win-win solution, since all parties in a conflict contribute in one way or the other to the conflict. The mediator's neutrality is necessary to enable him or her to effectively support disputants during the mediation process. The implication of Rosenberg's nonviolent communication and conflict mediation for Africa. The study revealed that Rosenberg's approach can enhance the African approach. The African traditional approach appears to pay attention to deliberating over issues and strategy instead of needs, and eventually give a verdict on who is right or wrong. It also sometimes uses persuasion to get disputants into an agreement, which might lead a party to compromise their needs for the other. Instead of deliberating over issues, strategies, and means of compromise, Rosenberg's approach focuses on identifying the unmet needs of both parties and search for adequate strategies that satisfy the needs of all the parties to transform the conflict. However, it requires training on feelings and needs literacy. Conversely, the African approach is more synodal because it involves a journey together of elders, the disputants, and the entire community, even though it has its limitations. Since Rosenberg's approach is more structured, it could enhance the African approach with its practical tools because it empowers people to focus on their needs, resist compromise, bias, corruption, favoritism, and the use of persuasion in mediation. Perhaps Rosenberg's nonviolent communication can help rediscover the African traditional mediation approach and enhance it with its practical tools. Conclusion. This paper examines conflict mediation as a synodal process in Africa and the contribution of Rosenberg's nonviolent communication. Conflict arises when people have disagreement in interests, needs, and values. Consequently, conflict mediation is common in different parts of Africa, and it has been a collaborative effort between elders and members of a community. However, the research reveals some prospects and limitations in the African traditional mediation approach and the need for an enhancement. Rosenberg's approach, which focuses on identifying and satisfying human needs, is an effective approach that can enrich the African traditional method. Hence, this paper recommends training on nonviolent communication to enhance conflict mediation and transformation in Africa. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. And now John Martin and Mary Justin.
I wish to share with you our topic, Promoting Synodality Through Mutual Collaboration of Religious Institutes in Africa, a Canonical Pastoral Approach. Before I make any presentation, I would like to invite you to make a quick journey of with an imagination, make a journey back, looking at the way 2 centuries back, how Africans, especially from the African perspective, how religious life was perceived, and then come back to today, the present time, how religious life is perceived, what a religious can do that could not do before, what is accepted today and before was a taboo. So we try to have that kind of imagination. And the second imagination, I also invite you to make to see the various religious institutes in Africa and beyond. Personally, just try to find out how many religious institutes you know. There are many. You can't know all of them. So with these two imagination, I invite you to, with these two imagination, we'll manage to follow up this kind of sharing. We have used two different methodologies, that is the juridical and pastoral, and we have tried to gather different research data from the Amesea region through interviews, open discussions. Personally, I carried out an open discussion with different religious within Africa from Uganda, Kenya, Zambia, Botswana, and Togo, and it was such an interesting discussion that helped us to come out with this beautiful topic that we wish to share. The study employs pastoral and canonical approach in order to achieve accurate description of the lived experiences and juridical magisterial application in the Amesea region, rather than generation of theories of the phenomenon. This is because the Code of Canon Law expresses the Church's juridical facet and acts as means of organizing and coordinating the Church's visible structure and governance in fulfilling the Church's mission. In other words, the juridical facet, the juridical approach of everything is a guideline, a measure that helps us to achieve pastoral efficacy. This study also explores various ways of enhancing mutual collaboration, cooperation, participation in service and in different activities of the Church, between or among the religious themselves, different religious institutes, with the lay people, with the authority of the Church, with the whole people of God. It also puts emphasis on synodality as a fundamental ecclesial character that defines the Church's identity. We all know that the Church is universal. So with this, it disposes all its members to mutual collaboration with due rights and obligations, to co-responsibility, thus becomes a visible form of communion, a path of ecclesial fraternity. This is the target of this paper, to demonstrate how possible can this be realized. Of course, there are challenges, but we must also give out what could be, how can we confront these challenges. This paper is divided into two parts. The first part expounds the ecclesial grounds of collaboration in apostolate infused in the synodality nature of the Church. That is, Church as people of God, Church as communion, Church as servant, and Church as mission itself. These are considered grounds. Also, we have tried to emphasize the obligation of the religious towards apostolic ministries of the Church. We are called to participate in them by duty, because it's a gift. Our consecration or consecrated life is a gift from the Church and to the Church. Therefore, we must give, because we receive. As we receive, we must give. However, as we participate fully, as we fulfill our obligations, we also have the duty to keep to the proper identity of each institute, because each institute has the autonomy, its particular patrimony, and particular mission, which tends to the universal mission of the Church. Actually, the Code of Canon Law dedicates 11 canons, a given particular part on this, to regulate these apostolic missions. So by the very nature and character of religious institutes, it's clearly stipulated in the code that the apostolic activities carried out by the religious must be exercised in the name and with the mandate of the Church, and always to be carried out in communion with the Church. This calls mutual collaboration, calls for cooperation, while keeping intact each particular identity of the institute. At this particular moment, I would like to invite my colleague, my Professor Martin, to give us an overview of the participation of the religious in the Amesea region.
So as we appreciate Sister Justin's presentation, I would wish to state that from the time of the arrival of the missionaries in Africa, and especially in the Amesea region, they embraced collaboration in the life of the church, not just as if it is a legal obligation incumbent upon them arising from the nature of their vocation, but they actually embraced collaboration in all dimensions of the church in Africa as their way of life, as their way of doing things. And this is evident when you read the constitutions of various religious institutes, when you read their directories and other pieces of legislation that regulate their life and operations. They propose at all times that they should collaborate with the church in an inclusive manner, in solidarity and in communion. And that is visible in all the activities of religious men and women and the members of societies. They participate in collaboration and under the guidance of pastors, especially the ordinaries. They collaborate with the pastors of souls within the parish levels, and they include the lay people in all their affairs. They propose interdependence. And therefore, we find that in their life, there is a constant manifestation, expression of synodality. I think we could say that religious life, life of members of the society, is a great expression of synodality. Now, in our interviews and open discussions with our respondents, we found that the religious men and women collaborate at various levels. And the first most significant field is that of catechesis, catechetical instruction, which scored very, very highly. Religious men and women and members of societies have contributed very significantly in the growth of the faith in Africa. They have shared the word of God tirelessly, but they don't do this in an isolated manner. They embrace this ministry of the prophetic ministry, collaborating in the life of Christ among the people in great communion with all the stakeholders. We find this is also evident in the health ministry. Religious men and women and members of societies touch lives of many people. But they do so not only as they give, but also as they receive. So there is that reciprocity that goes on in the collaboration of these people. Sometimes they have acted as professionals, sometimes just as pastoral agents, but they have made the life of the church felt in our region in Amesea and Africa at large. They collaborate in education. Probably the greater part of the academic institutions in Africa and beyond, we owe them to the collaboration of religious men and women. And they don't do these by themselves. always they also need other people. So their way of life, their way of doing things is always an expression of synodality. Within the diocesan family, we have several organs therein. We have curial offices, and religious men and women collaborate with those who work therein, with the ordinary, the tribunals, with the presbyteral councils, the council of consultors, with the other form of associations within the diocesan family. There is great contribution. And what makes them come out very distinctly is the beauty of their individual charisms and spirituality. So in brief, as we have very little time to expound our point, we want to reaffirm that the collaboration of religious men and women has been so significant for the growth of the church in our region. Thank you for the time.
Having followed the positive and the positive part of the participation of the religious men and women in the apostolic life of the particular churches, there are some challenges identified towards this mutual collaboration. And as I said at the beginning, it is through our research and the open discussions that we came out with these different challenges. In fact, Pope Francis, in the recent years, has issued different teachings, and he has unveiled a lot of modifications in the Code of Canon Law. He himself gives a reason in the different motu proprio, as he says. He wants to foster a sense of collegiality and pastoral responsibility, communion and oneness in the church on the part of the bishops, different bishops' conferences, among the religious communities, and to the whole people of God, such that we move as one unity, the church. He also intends to promote the principle of rationality, effectiveness, and efficiency in the apostolic ministry of particular levels of the church. We believe that with this, the local church authorities, the superiors, and all responsible will be able to respond rapidly, effectively, and precisely to the pastoral issues through their closeness to diverse circumstances. And from that, we have seen that there are challenges that hinder this kind of development. The first challenge actually that scored more in this kind of research was the ignorance of magisterial teachings on the side of the religious. It sounds, but it is true. Many respondents from the research, especially women religious, acknowledged this limitation as a root cause for their exploitation, misunderstandings, conflicts, and sometimes competition in many fields of apostolate and pastoral relations. They don't know the limits of their rights and duties, when to act and not when to act, the limits of powers and limits of action. And then, because this challenge actually is attributed to the formation programs in different institutes, that's why I gave you the first imagination of the 2 centuries back and and today, whereby today we need to be trained. We thank God for our superiors, because here we are so many religious. That means this kind of training has been put into action, because it's through this kind of training that could be an eye-opener for the religious to prepare them approach pastoral ecclesial contemporary challenges with competence and enthusiasm. Therefore, we recommend continuous training of religious men and women and the diocesan clergy to be competent in different fields in order to compete with the world today, unlike before. Secondly, we have identified inadequate consultations and dialogue. this challenge was mostly identified by religious superiors, mostly, as one of the challenges that they face that leads to cause of quarrels, misunderstandings, tensions, especially when it comes to land issues, property ownership, and the like. And therefore, with this, we recommend mutual dialogue and proper discernment through different leaders of the church and on different levels, right from the lowest activity of apostolate to the top. Because through this, dialogue presupposes discernment, which creates a greater necessity of bishops, religious superiors, and other leaders discerning together, make decisions together, and that is synodality that we advocate for today. We identified another challenge as crisis identity. And crisis identity comes as from the development of new poverties, new, different. We realize that unlike before, today we have different ministries. Before it was unheard of. A sister to study law was, oh, it is too much, could not. To some extent that sisters could not be sent to school before a certain level, but today we have to be trained. We have to reach out to people from the street to the offices. Therefore, this kind of new poverty is not a challenge that is against creative fidelity. We always have to only be attentive to keep to the identity of each institute, of each religious. And for that, as we come to the conclusion, we also identified another recommendation as capacity building and empowerment of the religious and the diocesan clergy plus the laity to allow this collaboration, because we work together. Therefore, this capacity building, we believe, transforms people's lives from a state of conformity to dynamic state of creative and innovative living to achieve a common goal. Lastly, I would give one recommendation and then come to the conclusion. We also recommend to adopt interrelations lifestyle that introduces another perspective of internal and external harmony as a concrete necessary tool to embrace organic ecclesial communion in the church, being in the church and with the church. Conclusion. From our presentation, we come to define synodality from our own perspective as the modus vivendi et operandi of the church, which reveals and gives substance to the people of God being in communion and actively collaborating their evangelizing mission. Advocating mutual collaboration of the religious in the apostolic life of the particular churches promotes co-responsibility, enhances their charisms and ministries, promotes their active participation in mission of the church, and intensifies the bonds of mutual fraternity to a common ecclesial communion and mission. Therefore, this paper has demonstrated how synodality is an indispensable prerequisite for giving the church a renewed missionary impetus, because communion and mission are profoundly interconnected. Thank you.
So now we have some limited time for dialogue and further listening. One of the challenges of something like this is to not know where we're going to end up. So an open dialogue and conversation is what we invite. If I might provide a framework of what I understood from my particular perspective, was an opening description of the theology of the people, which provides not only a theoretical but a faith foundation for our commitment to each other as children of God, and therefore a commitment to be in relationship. And then we heard an example of ways that conflict mediation can provide for us opportunities to grow and evolve particular methods that can enable that, a form of institutionalizing this kind of synodal encounter. And then finally, research on real examples of the ways that we face these challenges. And as we descend from the universal to the very particular, I find those tensions to be very similar and the ways that we seek concrete, organic, dynamic, living, surprising relationships, and yet we want to do them consistently. And that's what I continuously struggle with to institutionalize. So I invite any commentary from anyone, just simply raise your hand. If we had a mic, do we have a roving microphone that works? Or use your teacher voices. There's a, right here, and then in the,
I'm Stembele Sepuga from South Africa. What I appreciate from the presentation is the link of synodality with pastoral collaboration. I really appreciate that because it brings it down to concrete levels. It's not just about talking. Right now we're involved in the process of answering questions. And some of us may think that this synodality it's about that. Whereas what I'm picking up from here, you are translating synodality into a practical way of being church. That what we are talking about now, this synodality, as if it's something new, is something that has happened, that has been happening. And so we are not really doing something new, we are only harnessing it, you know. So I really appreciate that. But one question that I have when question time comes is, you have said that in your research you have seen that religious have been collaborative, you know, and working with people, working with civil bodies, working with the diocese. How do you explain that some, if not many, of the institutions that they have been running once, speaking for South Africa, for example, those institutions died with them when they died. In other words, when a congregation left. We have many hospitals there now that have been sold. We have schools, that are not run. But if, as you claim, they have been in collaboration with others while they were doing that, they were not working alone. How do you explain that after they are gone, these institutions also go?
Thank you very much. I would think that as much as such an institution was properly collaborating, but probably they ignored a certain aspect of their own internal life that were not promoting vocations. That is some aspect that sometimes we really ignore. Like there are so many institutes which have come to a close because there are no vocations. And that is really pathetic. This is an eye-opening that institutions, while they collaborate, they should also open up for more new members to embrace their charisms and spirituality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Jody Mikalachki. I'm here from Burundi. And thank you for the two very good presentations that we heard. I wanted to ask Sister Lillian about the way forgiveness figures in a lot of the conflict transformation models that you were discussing. And my question is really, what happens to what is essentially a spiritual gift and experience when it begins to figure in social and political models for change, for peace building, for national recovery after mass violence? What happens when forgiveness is mandated, for instance, as it was in the Gacaca process in Rwanda? What happens when You were mentioning some models in which forgiveness is advised, and that is certainly the case. I mean, our Lord advises us to forgive. But there is some advice that comes in the form almost of command. I'm thinking even in the church, for instance, women who are suffering from domestic abuse can be strongly advised to forgive when perhaps they need to leave a situation in which they can be killed and in which their children are also suffering. So I wanted to ask you, really, are we losing our own spiritual concept of forgiveness as it begins to be translated into certain social and political models? And I would end my question by quoting a Burundian priest, Father Zachary Bukuru, who at his minor seminary of Buta was attacked and 40 boys were killed during the civil war in Burundi. And he said of his eventual capacity to forgive the attackers that forgiveness is really a movement of the heart and a gift, and we either welcome it or we do not. Thank you.
I didn't get your question very well, but what I heard from you, you spoke about forgiveness. You are asking question about forgiveness in relation to the approach I described. The approach I'm talking about is when you made reference to mass violence, abuse, and so on. When this happens, there are needs that are at stake. The victim has unmet needs in relation to the action of the offender. In this situation, for forgiveness to take place, the need of the victims needs to be identified in relation to how the person feels about the experience. And also, even the perpetrator has a need. The problem is the strategy he or she or the group of persons used in meeting that need, which is a tragic strategy and which is violent to the recipient. So in this case, for forgiveness to take place, there is need for mediation, whereby the victim or victims and the offenders are brought together to meet with each other through the help of a mediator. And before then, there is need for connection to provide a safe space for both to meet each other. And during the process, it is important for the mediator to connect with the feelings of the victims and also that of the perpetrator. Through this, the mediator will help them to really identify their unmet needs. And when they are able to connect with one another's needs, they discover that there was no need to use the approach the perpetrator used. Rather, there are many strategies he or she could have used to satisfy that need. So once they have been able to identify the needs, the mediator helps both of them to search for non-violent strategies to meet their needs. It is at the point of realizing and identifying their needs that is when they really have that connection and search for strategies that will satisfy both parties. From there, forgiveness can take place.
I am Cosmas Uzawulu from Nigeria. I thank the presenters for their good presentation. My question goes to Lillian. Thank you for your presentation. I enjoyed your presentation, and especially the area when you talk about the elders in some African societies being architect of mediation, and also he pointed out that at times there is this, it is very deficient, where these elders actually are collaborators or perpetrators of this violence. I love that so much. And that's why you also mentioned about external, or what I may call modern means of mediation. I also see that one as being deficient, because all these points you mentioned are what I might call horizontal forms of mediation. Because when you leave them at this horizontal level, as you can see in Africa, the problem continues, because we are emphasizing on the horizontal process. Without the vertical mediation, it continues to remain deficient. And that vertical is where God comes in. When you talk about the issue of conflict resolution, when it remains at the horizontal level, without bringing the concept of God, we continue to suffer. So my question is, where is God in this process?
Between us and God. My relationship with you promotes my relationship with God. If I say I love God and I don't love you, who I see face to face, then I have no love for God. This is manifested in my connecting with my needs and your needs. There we are able to collaborate in promoting our interpersonal relationship and the relationship with God.
This will be the, was there one more? Okay. This will be our final comment before we wrap up.
Thank you very much. I'm Elizabeth Adeloju from the Catholic Institute of West Africa, Nigeria. I want to appreciate all the presenters, but I want to go along with Sister Lillian on nonviolent communication. Thank you for taking us through this process and for going through Marshal Rosenberg's approach. Thank you, but I have a little doubt about the processes. You know, it has to start with the mediator. And today, you know, conflict is everywhere, and that's why we are coming on you on this. Now that the mediator is so important in negotiating among the parties or between the parties, in a case that the mediator is biased, in a case that the mediator already have a little bit of hatred on one side or on the other side, how can we achieve that win-win approach that you talk about? Then, if we don't achieve the win-win resolution, are we really talking about the non-violence? Can that also lead to non-violence? So maybe we have to really enlighten us on the role of the mediator, because today that is what we see. When Rosenberg was talking about these 5 approaches, probably he was not seeing that mediators could be biased, could take side, could be partial, and all that. But now that realities of today is what we see, that the mediators are not really there. So how can we still achieve the non-violence with the mediators that might be biased? Thank you very much.
Not there. You are doing a different thing. It's no longer non-violent communication. So that intention to connect must be there. And that is why there is need for training. If you want to use these principles, you need to really be trained as a mediator. And also, honesty is very, very important in using non-violent communication, whereby a mediator is not tending towards being biased to a party, then the person is using a different approach. So, non-violent communication, for you to use it, you need to follow the integrity of honesty and the intention to connect. Thank you.
Let's give our thanks to our presenters, Emilce, Lillian, Mary, Justin, and John, and our conference leadership. Thank you all. We now seek to transition to our next sessions. Thank you all for being at the plenary.
We also clap for our able moderator for the first session, please. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. Now, we are at 12:30. It's 12:30. We have our concurrent sessions and discussions. And we'll have two groups, these concurrent sessions. The first one is on synodality. As per your program. And the second one is on changing paradigms of synodality as per your program. So those who will be looking at the first concurrent session on synodality will remain here. Please take note. You're going to remain here. Those who will choose the theme on synodality. Those who want to choose the theme on changing paradigms of synodality will go to room 15 upstairs. So when you get to the stairs outside, go up. On your left, there's room 15, is where you'll be meeting discussions, and the the sessions will take place there. Are we together? So, are we together? Are we together? Yes. Thank you.
Oui, donc c'est une annonce. Nous aurons à présent 2 ateliers. Le premier atelier avec Cléousa, vous restez ici. Donc vous avez le choix. Si vous choisissez Cléousa, vous restez ici. Si vous prenez Cynthia, vous allez en haut. Et donc il y aura 2 ateliers au même moment qui vont se passer. Maintenant, c'est à vous de choisir où vous voulez rester et suivre là-bas.
The chair for the session on synodality is Sigrid. Sigrid? Yes, you're going to remain here with one group. And the chair for the session on changing paradigms of synodality is Sister Bibiana Ngundo. Sister Bibiana? Yes, you lead your team to room 15 upstairs. Thank you. And this will be running up to 1:30, and then we go for lunch, the same venue where we were for the breakfast. Is that okay? Thank you.
Donc nous mangerons à 13h30 et on a annoncé les 2 présidentes de séance. C'est Ingrid et puis c'est Bibiane. Yeah.